Imagine this. You've got this enemy. How'd you make this enemy? Well, 20 years ago, you offered to take him shopping, and he has never forgiven you. And he is an epic, world class hater and grudge holder like no one you've ever known. And now he gets unprecedented power over you. I'm Ellen. This is the bitch slap of truth. Hello, my media savvy friend. We're going to dive in today to another dominant narrative in our culture and the number one show on Netflix this week, The Reckoning, P. Diddy, or rather, Sean Combs' The Reckoning, famously executively produced by Curtis Jackson, or 50 Cent. So, like I said, you've got this enemy, and now you're in big trouble. And you need to control the narrative. The narrative has gotten out of control, it's gotten out of your hands, and you need to pull it back in. You've been controlling narrative successfully for decades. It's made you billions. You control the narrative in hip hop so well as P. Diddy that despite the fact that you cannot rap, you cannot dance, and you're a shit performer, the Grammys gave you a Grammy for Rap Album of the Year, not to Wu-Tang. So I think, the Grammys have a lot to answer for, but that's just one of them. So you're paid P. Diddy and you hired this film crew and you want to make a documentary about how you're actually a really good guy. So you're just going to invite them all in. But then somehow your enemy, then somehow your enemy gets this footage instead. This is the footage you were shooting with the film crew to make yourself look really good, and your enemy gets a hold of the footage. Why? Because you didn't pay for it, and he did. And now he's using the footage that you are going to use to control the narrative and turn yourself into a really good guy to show the world why actually you really suck. And now this footage that you originally commissioned is the framing device for the number one documentary on Netflix, The Reckoning. So now, in addition to all the really horrible shit stuff that people have known about you and have really known about you for the past 2 years, there's also some new footage that seems to hint that you are also the guy behind the murders of two of the most loved figures in hip hop, Biggie and Tupac. And if that's not bad enough, we find out you're also the guy who decided to have a big, huge funeral celebration, the biggest New York's ever seen. The only thing is, you're going to go ahead and make Biggie pay for his own funeral that you decided to throw. So, this is really not a cute look for you. I just was dying to share an old white hip hop head, old lady's perspective on this number one show on Netflix, The Reckoning. I love that this documentary is 4 entire episodes of hate and trolling. Again, props to hit 50 Cent. Nobody hates quite like him. I love imagining P. Diddy seeing this, like every episode opening up with produced by Curtis Jackson. This shit is wild. I heard from comedian Josh Johnson that allegedly, as 50's going around promoting this documentary, he's only doing interviews on ABC because allegedly the only channel they show in prison is ABC. So that is just extra level cold. I saw someone on YouTube say, I hope someday someone loves me as much as 50 Cent hates Diddy. I think that I am just so here for this. My personal obsession in life is narrative control, narrative shaping, narrative warfare. And whenever I'm shown anything, I'm always thinking about what isn't being shown. What am I being asked to look at? And thus, what am I being encouraged not to look at? What's the agenda? What's the narrative being pushed? Why is this existing and why is it in my face? And I think that type of media savvy, especially as AI takes over the airwaves, is something we all really need right now. Just like core narrative skills about how people are telling us stories, what they're leaving out, and what they're asking us to look at. I think it's really interesting to consider, like, if there's a dominant narrative about Diddy after everything that's happened and his trial, what narrative is being challenged here? Why is there suddenly this footage that nobody's ever seen before that sort of explicitly ties P. Diddy to the murders of Tupac and Biggie? I think it's really important to remember like this choice, like why is it being made this way? Engagement sells, outrage sells, and you want to prioritize anything salacious or sensational over anything that, you know, kind of digs a little bit deeper into the weeds of a factual basis. And just always remember everything we see, everything we hear is dictated by the attention economy. And here, the attention economy, our eyeballs and earballs are being masterfully directed, both by an not unnamed, by a woman Black filmmaker whose name I can't remember right now, who's the director, and that's really embarrassing. I need to look that up. And also by the ultimate troll of all time, 50 Cent. And again, the story is that he's told over many years, many podcasts, many interviews, is that one of the many reasons he hates P. Diddy so much is P. Diddy offered to take him shopping like he was a girl, and 50 wasn't happening it. If you want to go deeper into why 50 hates P. Diddy this much, I recommend Trap Lore Ross on YouTube. But I love the fact that this was all started over, a man offering another man to take him shopping. I was watching this and my thoughts, I was like, wait, what's missing here? Why am I being told this story? Hip hop journalist Torre brought something up, and I was like, yes, that. He brings up, very specifically the documentary in addition to this private footage that 50 has, gotten control of, and these various people being interviewed. There's a very specific narrative that a lot of the documentary is about. It's one episode, but a lot is sort of packed in around this, about this murder of Biggie and Tupac. The only problem is there's only one real witness to this, who's this dude named Keefe D. And he was in the Crips, I think, in LA. He was offered a proffer, like one of those things where you're like, hey, I'm going to tell the government a story and let's see what happens here. So he's the only one who really has the story about Diddy commissioning him, Keefe D, and about 40 other gang members who we say were in the room to get rid of Tupac. That's the only source of that story. And I just want you to keep that in mind. Why is that the story that's being pushed when there's another story, in fact, two stories that are absent entirely? And the first one that I think is really disturbing is there's not a lot of evidence from anyone else except this one dude, Keefe D, about the whole, Diddy wanted Tupac murdered. But there is a ton of evidence. There are a ton of different people who've come out and said, over the last several years, have come out and said, hey, remember that woman that was with Diddy for, decades and gave birth to, I think, all four of his children? She was this beautiful woman named Kim Porter. And Diddy saw her when he first came to work for Uptown Records. This is way back in the 90s before Bad Boy. And she was gorgeous and he wanted her. And they eventually got together and she had four of his kids. And she was with him off and on, even during like the Jennifer Lopez phase, all that stuff. Well, now the only problem is this healthy, fit woman died of pneumonia at the age of 47. And there are a lot of people close to him, close to her, who have absolutely banged the drum on this. There are a lot of people that could have been interviewed that probably weren't interviewed, who could speculate on this with some fact, and that is just not there. There's multiple people who can talk about that or what they think about that versus one Keefe D, right? So that's really interesting. And, another person who's completely absent from this documentary, who was around for so much of it, is Jay-Z. He's not even mentioned. It's like he doesn't exist. Beyonce doesn't exist. There's just Bad Boy and Suge Knight, and that's it, Death Row. And I think it's really, really interesting. I think it's also interesting that Clive Davis is barely mentioned. He just kind of drives by, right? And also, there are a lot of people who have come out to talk about weird, very graphic, strange things that Diddy has done with boys and men. And those are completely gone, not there in the documentary as well. And I think it's really important to remember, like, who is this for? Who is the intended audience for this? And we always have to ask that about any narrative that we're shown. Who's the intended audience? What's the agenda? What are we being asked to look at? And I would say this documentary is not so much for the culture, it's for a more mainstream audience that know Biggie and Tupac, but they don't know about Kim Porter. That's just not something that's part of the lore. So I came of age in the early 90s and I just love rap. I loved hip hop. I loved Ice-T. I loved NWA. I loved Schoolie D. Um, and I knew it wasn't for me. I know I'm an outsider to that culture. It's not for me, but it just had an authenticity and honesty and this rebellion that rock and roll and pop just did not have. Plus, it's fucking like the best to dance to. And I love to dance. I am a former dancer. I'm just an old white lady now. But back then, I lived in Chicago. I loved dancing in clubs, especially black clubs. I was there for the NWA Fuck the Police concert in Cincinnati. And despite being a young white teenager, like everyone just gave me space to do my thing. I love black authors. I like black filmmakers. And in spite of this love that I had, I just did not understand. I did not understand Puffy. I didn't understand Puff Daddy. And I had black friends. Now, this is very important. Whenever you're white, you always got to tell people that you have black friends. But my black friends were also like, what the heck? Like, watching Puffy was so painful. He can't rap, he can't dance. Josh Johnson, in one of his recent sets, comedian Josh Johnson just said, did he dance like Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder? Um, Craig Mack's wife, Craig Mack was a very successful early rapper who's almost disappeared. His name has disappeared from the culture. Most people don't remember him. But his wife, or former wife, I don't know if they're still married, Roxanne Mack, like she at some point in watching all this, she's like, oh, this guy sucks. And that's how most hip hop fans did feel about Diddy, especially people who were fans prior to Bad Boy, people who really came into it before then. And I remember very vividly watching the Source Awards on TV and Suge Knight, who was the founder of Death Row Records, and that was eventually became Tupac's label. It's Snoop Dogg. It's I think Dr. Dre was part of that as well. Correct me if I am wrong, but when he came on the Source Awards in the early, I think this is like mid 90s. I gotta look that up when that is. But he comes on nationally televised awards and he's like, hey, if you want to be a rapper and you don't want some producer like dancing all over your records and singing and like trying to rap, come to Death Row. It was awesome. I was crying, laughing, granted drunk and high, but I was like, oh my God, Suge Knight, you may have killed many people, but I just love you. Um, I think there's something part of Black culture, like just the way the world absorbs it, the way America absorbs it, the way all kinds of people, not just white people, but especially white people, absorb Black culture. There is just something so cool about most of it. And what is cool? Like, if you really have to boil it down, what is cool? And I think one way to describe cool would be that cool is unbothered. Like, that's cool. It's unbothered. And Puff Daddy was just the opposite. He was so fundamentally bothered. And just, you could see him sweating to be liked, to be admired. And mostly that was just annoying because it's fine. Like, here you are, you're this incredible party producer. You're super successful very early in life. Granted, you did throw a party where 9 people were killed because it was over promoted, which interestingly enough is the same number, and 9 people were killed at Travis Scott's Astroworld. So that's interesting. But Diddy was very successful, very popular, very good at bringing people together. His parties were legendary. He recognized talent. He had a sense for the business. Um, Granted, he was also willing to do almost anything, regardless of what it was. But I just mean he had his lane and he just wouldn't stay there. He was just, you could see it. You could see when he was, the very few times we saw him on film with like Biggie and Tupac or so pictures of him, you could just see that he was eaten up, that he was not like either of these guys. He wasn't naturally talented. He couldn't do this stuff and he wanted to so badly. And I remember very, very much so. I was teaching at University of Denver in that year, 96, when both first Tupac and then Biggie are killed. And I remember seeing that MTV, I think it's an MTV Awards, where Diddy comes out, or he was Puff Daddy still at the time. That's another thing. Like, stop naming yourself so much shit. Like, it's so pathetic. It's so stupid. Stop it. Anyway, he came out and did that huge production with Sting of the hip hop version of Every Breath You Take. And there's a choir. And it's like this glorious, allegedly, this glorious celebration of Biggie, but it's not. Like, you don't have to be that sophisticated a viewer to understand this is a celebration of Puff Daddy's love for Biggie, or in shorthand, it's a celebration of love of Puff Daddy. Look at him. What a good friend. What an amazing person. He's the person who brought us this, incredible funeral to recognize Biggie. The only problem is Biggie also had to pay for it. It was taken out of whatever money Biggie had left at the time. But I just remember it like busted me. It hurt to watch that bullshit. And I was like, Sting, like, who hurt you? How did they get you to do this? This is not a good idea. Like, it was just so painful to watch. And I think hip hop fans, white and black, like, we hip hop fans knew this wasn't real. We didn't know what was going on, but we could feel it. Like, there was just something creepy about this. It was really, really weird. And you could see, again, Diddy didn't just want to be in the center of the money and the power and the production. He wanted to be in the center of culture. And that's what he became. That's what happened. He really took over and created an entire new industry and genre. And he brought hip hop up to the pop level and he made it this hugely popular thing that until very recently it was. I think we could argue very easily about its dropping significance just by numbers. But that's what's so weird. Like, Puff Daddy had such a cause in that. He was such a force in that. And it wasn't enough. It just was not enough for that man. It's so funny. Like, somebody just said, I just saw a comment on YouTube. If you know the podcaster and YouTuber, conservative commentator Candace Owens, she's in a big fight right now with Turning Point USA, which is the program that was started by Charlie Kirk. And it's a whole thing. But someone just said about it, like, having nothing to do with the Reckoning documentary, someone just said in the comments, like, this is Death Row versus Bad Boy all over again, which I just loved. I think as we kind of look at this documentary and take it apart and really see what it means, I think there's something that we just have to acknowledge, which is when things getting big tend to ruin things we love. I've been reading and watching a lot this past couple weeks about not just like The Reckoning and that documentary, but also Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl and what her fans think of that and what people think of that. And also Stranger Things, the Netflix show, has come back with a season 5. So people are talking about that again. And in all 3 cases with Taylor Swift and Stranger Things and this little very New York, very specific music form. Well, New York and LA, but very specific form that came out of New York, this beloved thing that was hip hop. Like in all those cases, hip hop and Stranger Things was this tiny little very tight 8-part series, which just barely got into Netflix, got no promotion. No one was expecting that much. And then it becomes the juggernaut, right? It becomes the industry. It's the flagship show that made Netflix. And it is their biggest and most important show. And by the way, right now, as I'm talking, Reckoning, the Sean Combs documentary, is number one. Stranger Things season 5 is number 2. And then Taylor Swift is so big. She again also is the music industry. And yet there's this whole mythology for people who love Taylor Swift that's built on her records and this idea of a young girl opening her diary and the jealousy and the fire and the romance and the crushing oblivion of lost love, right? And now what's happening specifically in the response to Life of a Showgirl, her new album. And I think the question to ask is like, what happens when a single person or a single project becomes the industry, right? As Puffy really made rap a pop phenomenon, a Billboard phenomenon in the 90s. And as Taylor Swift is the music industry now, there's no one who comes even close. She is 100, 1,000x beyond everyone else. And or the famous takedown of a couple summers ago, about a year and a half ago, what Drake really did with hip hop and how Kendrick took him down. And, you know, all those cases, there's something that started small that becomes this beloved thing. And the bigger and the bigger and the bigger it gets, the more it becomes unrecognizable. I want to read this quote from, there's a YouTube channel called The Swiftologist, and he is a great cultural critic. And I just love this. I love this quote. He says, he's talking about Taylor Swift and the most recent album and what Taylor's doing. He says, the logic of capitalism insists on constant growth. Once you're the biggest, you cannot stop because stopping is the same as dying. The monopoly must keep producing, dominating, and consuming, or shareholders will panic. When it comes to the reckoning and the narrative that it's sharing, is it challenging our narrative about Diddy? Or is it just piling on? Who really pays the price for what happened to all these people that Puffy harmed? And who am I being asked to blame? And that is so interesting. If you look at the whole history of everything that's happened with the trial and the people's response to the verdict at Puffy's trial, there's this very common dominant narrative that's there. And it's basically like, hey, this one guy, he is the fucking devil, okay? He's the devil. He's the problem. The industry isn't the problem. Late stage capitalism isn't the problem. Media isn't the problem. The attention economy and what we're willing to give our eyeballs and earballs and hearts to, that's not the problem. And I think when we just stop there, when we watch these 4 episodes, and again, props to 50 Cent for getting 4 episodes of hate out of this. I think when we just watch it and leave it there and we walk away with, I think he killed Biggie and Tupac. I think there's something missing there. There's this really interesting moment where there's this woman named Aubrey O'Day. She was in a Diddy created group. Diddy had this incredibly stupid show on MTV called Making the Band. And then he draws that out for multiple seasons because he sees like music isn't it, reality TV is it. So there's this woman named Aubrey O'Day who was in this women's group called Danity Kane that was actually pretty successful. And she's doing her interview about, the gross shit that Diddy did to her. She's reading some of the emails he wrote to her. I think it's really interesting that it's so fucked up. This is so fucked up. In one of the emails he writes to her, he's always writing about masturbating about her to her, but he can't spell masturbating. He spells it with an E instead of a U. And I feel like something you do so much and obsess about so much, you should probably be able to spell it. But anyway, so she's confronted also, like in her interview for this documentary, she's given like this email, she's given this message that she reads on air, and you can tell from her face, this is the first time. And it's basically someone writing to her about something they saw that Diddy did to her, Aubrey O'Day. And you can tell when she's reading this, she has no memory of this event. It's like what, unfortunately, those the baby oil with the what is it, GHB that's in it, apparently was used. Things were done. This is what happened, by the way, around Diddy all the time. Is like people suddenly, they have lost time. Where did it go? Anyway, so the interviewer's asking her, like, did you know about this? Because you can tell from her face, she's just shocked. She's shooketh. And, what are you going to do? And she says, I don't know. She says, on the one hand, like, I guess I should reach out and find out more. But on the one hand, like, I don't want to find out more about this thing that happened. But on the other hand, maybe I should find out more because, and like, there's in a lot of the commentary, there's this judgment on her. She's damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. If she just lets that go and doesn't find out more, she's letting someone else down. She's another person around him who's propping him up and not ringing the bell and calling attention. And yet, like, if she does, what's the cost and the trauma going to be there for her? I mean, here's the bitch slap of truth about this documentary. I think we are generally, as a society, getting much savvier about when something that was special and beautiful and loved gets really big, and then all of a sudden there's just this, authenticity to it, but it's manufactured authenticity. It's carefully curated narrative. And I think as a whole, we're getting a little savvier to this. We can feel it a little bit more easily when people are basically their core motive for every fucking thing they do is just to get more money, more power. That's it. And everything is being milked for that, and everything is being sacrificed for that. And yet we're being presented with this version of, authentic, what? Authentic rap, authentic black maleness, authentic black women, authentic music, and or authentic, like the big thing Diddy always did was mentorship. Like he always wanted to present himself as just this guy that lifted other people up. I mean, he got a key to the freaking city of New York just a few months before he was arrested and indicted. And you see him in this footage that 50 Cent got that, again, Diddy was using it for his own documentary. Apparently he didn't pay for it. And 50 Cent, who has his ways, swept in and got a hold of that material. And it's used as sort of, because a lot of stuff in this documentary we've seen before, but this framing of Sean Combs just wandering around New York, talking to his lawyer, trying to figure out, like looking out the window, oh, hey, there's the cops right over there. And like trying to figure out how they're going to create a counter narrative to get him out of trouble. It's that footage that's being used to challenge the dominant narrative that's already out there about Sean Combs. And you just see him like walking around and being driven around and biking around for days and just trying to scrape up just a little bit of juice from the people on the street who want to take selfies with him or, just want anything to do with him. And it's clear he is so lost. Like he has no concept of anything outside the narrative he has created. And it's weird to him. You hear him arguing with his lawyer early on because the lawyer's like, well, on CNN, by the way, the funniest thing in this whole documentary, I like over and over, just makes me die laughing. This documentary is mostly Black voices, Black men, Black women telling this story. They've got Diddy's childhood friends. They've got some people who came up with him. They've got his business partner for Bad Boy, Kirk Burroughs, who got kicked out of Bad Boy and later endured homelessness as well as some other things. So you've got all these like really interesting Black voices telling the story, and then intercepted every once in a while is a comment from a 90s white news anchor. And you've been getting used to this cadence of the Black voices, and then all of a sudden there'll be like a clip from like, 1996, like white rapper and hip-hop star Tupac Shakur was allegedly murdered in Las Vegas, authorities say. Tupac, famous for his, like it just sounds so ridiculous. And I invite you to enjoy that treat. Don't miss those moments. But it's so interesting, ultimately, to watch media and consider, like, who is this for? What's the story that's being told? What narrative is being challenged? And what narrative is being swept under the rug? And I would argue that Puff Daddy did a pretty good job. Like it is well known by people in the industry. People in the industry have been talking about his shit for decades. And if you're a hip hop fan, you know it. You've heard about it. And then the rest of the world kind of finds out about it. And then 50 Cent, who was asked by Diddy to go shopping with him 20 years ago, finally has this moment, scoops up this footage where you see this man, Diddy, Daddy, Puffy, Brother Love, so pathetic. It's so bad. You see this man just wandering around lost. And at one point he goes out and he's like shaking a bunch of hands and kissing babies and everything. He gets back in the car and he's like, ugh, I need hand sanitizer. He's been with his public, the great unwashed Black people in New York City. And all he can think about is hand sanitizer. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor. So for this documentary, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think 50 did the best job with? Like what, and again, forgive me, I'm going to go back in and refilm this with the name of the Black woman filmmaker, the director, because it's really sad. It's sad. It's wrong that I can't remember her name because I've been consumed by the narrative, the media narrative of Diddy versus Fitty, right? And so this woman's getting lost. But as you consume something like this, how do you feel? What did they leave out for you? What are you left with? What's your final thesis, like final feeling? Where do you go from here? Why was this worth watching for you? And what did you notice was left out? Who did you notice disappeared from this show? Who do you think was the most credible? And, do you think there's enough evidence? Are there enough sources to prove to you that Tupac and Biggie were both out, they're both taken down by Diddy? Do you believe that? Do you think the proof is there? And if so, what do you think it says about us and what we missed with two of the most brilliant, beloved, upcoming, like brand new stars in rap in their early 26 years old, I believe both of them were. Or no, sorry, Tupac was 26 and Biggie was like 23. If it's true that somebody in rap took them out, like, is it fair that we got left with decades of what Diddy did? What Diddy did? Did he do it? What Diddy did to rap? And are you somebody who's wondering what happened to Kim Porter? I'm Ellen Melko Moore. This is the Bitch Slap of Truth. Thanks for listening. And I would love to know what you think. Whether you're a fan or not a fan of hip hop, I'd love to know, like, how does this documentary hit you? What stands out? And what do you think's the missed opportunity in the narrative?